bipartisan health policy do Greg Hunt and Catherine King, representing the Labor Party, as announced effectively after my question at the National Press Club yesterday.
We're talking Canberra.
Yesterday at the National Press Club of Australia, I asked Health Minister Greg Hunt and Shadow Minister for Health, spokesperson for the Labor Party, Catherine King, about the fact that the most preventable health issue killing more Australians is still smoking. And I asked them about vaping, and vaping is using modern technology to inhale nicotine without the smoke. The Food and Drug Administration in America has finally licensed alternative non-smoke generating product that allows an addicted nicotine user, that's someone that's addicted to dangerous carcinogenic cigarettes, to use alternative delivery systems called vaping. We've spoken about this on the radio before, but $17 billion was collected in tobacco excise as announced in this budget for 2019-2020. That delivers part thereof of the $7.2 billion surplus, $7.2 billion surplus announced by the coalition government. More than a person dies every 28 minutes here in Australia as a result of their addiction to tobacco, whether it be heart disease, whether it be emphysema. One Australian dies every 28 minutes. Are we going to let that continue? Well, I want to ask what Brian Marlow, the campaign director at Legalise Vaping Australia, thought about the answers given by Minister Hunt and by Catherine King. And I'm pleased to say Brian Marlow was watching the debate at the National Press Club yesterday. Joins me now. Brian, what was your reaction to Minister Hunt and Shadow Minister King?
Frustrated. I mean, you asked a very good question, and unfortunately, the Health Minister and the Shadow Minister barely even gave you a proper answer. Again, it just shows that they're ignoring overwhelming evidence from overseas. We're now at the point where the Food and Drug Administration over in America has agreed and publicly stated that vaping products and products that don't create the smoke and the tar and all those kinds of things are a net benefit to public health. Yet for some reason our Health Minister and our Shadow Health Minister seems to think otherwise.
$17 billion collected in tobacco excise. It goes into central revenue. It goes to the finance department. $17 billion. It was Labor's policy to increase the tobacco excise. They didn't win government in 2016, but the Liberal coalition government led by Malcolm Turnbull adopted that increase in fuel excise. Can you quite believe $17 billion? It's the fourth highest excise or tax raised in the Commonwealth, Brian Marlow.
Yeah, I mean, we're essentially taxing people's addictions all the way to their graves. These are people that have tried to quit smoking and they can't. And we've just slapped a big new tax on them. And as he said, it's helping us plug the budget. But they're treated like second-class citizens.
All right.
And separate to that, the Health Minister is saying that he's not going to legalise vaping under his watch, except he's announced an independent inquiry into vaping. So he's announced an inquiry to use taxpayer dollars to pay for it, and is turning around saying, it doesn't actually matter, though, even it's still not going to happen under my watch.
I spoke to one of the senior officers from the Australian National University that has been commissioned to do that inquiry into e-cigarettes. Have you seen the terms of reference, Brian Marlow?
No, we've not seen the terms of reference. Despite being Australia's largest pro-vaping advocacy organisation, we haven't been sent a copy of the terms of reference. We don't know what's happening with that inquiry. Vapers don't know what's happening.
I was approached by a number of people who very vehemently said, no, vaping's too dangerous. Too many children will take up vaping. How do you respond to that allegation that if vaping was legalised in Australia, it'd be young people, children, because that's been the evidence allegedly in the United States? How do you respond to Minister Hunt and to Shadow Minister King's assertions that it would be too dangerous to legalise vaping, too many kids would take it up?
Look at the overwhelming existing evidence. We have evidence out of the UK and out of New Zealand that youths are not taking up vaping at an alarming rate.
America? What about America?
Well, America had an issue previously where some teens had taken up vaping, but that's because they didn't have any regulations really on vaping. They barely even had age restrictions on sales of some of these products in some of those states. These are things that can't possibly happen in Australia. And when you look at the UK, which is a good model that we youth haven't taken up vaping. There was an evidence update published in February where the Public Health Group in England stated that youth vaping wasn't something that's backed up by the evidence.
All right. Yes or no? Legalise Vaping Australia, which has been lobbying and working hard to be able to educate Australians about alternatives to dangerous tobacco smoke. Are you in any way, shape or form funded by companies like Philip Morris? Do you have any links to the tobacco industry anywhere in the world?
Absolutely not. We're not funded a single dollar by the tobacco industry. For Greg Hunt to say that anyone is essentially supporting vaping is probably just a tobacco shill, or is it there has to be tobacco is just a lie.
Bipartisanship from both Labor and the Coalition. Do you see policy changing after an inquiry conducted by the Australian National University? But arguably, if the terms of reference do not fully investigate, particularly age-related addiction and the success of age-related nicotine addiction and the outcomes of the use currently, for many illegally, that are illegally vaping and importing product into this nicotine into this country, will you commit to investigate with the Minister the terms of reference and hopefully contribute to a fairer balance in relation to that reporting from the ANU?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we want this report to be as balanced and as fair as possible. It needs to consider all of the evidence, and we're confident that if they do consider all the evidence, that the result will be in favour of legalising vaping.
Thanks for being there this morning, and I appreciate you watching that address to the National Press Club. This issue is not going to go away. $17 billion collected in tobacco excise, Brian Marlow. They're addicted to that cash. And as I pointed out, $7.2 billion surplus on the back of people's addiction to tobacco. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Brian Marlow is the campaign director, Legalise Vaping Australia. And particularly Catherine King said that the log rollers, the lobbyists from the tobacco companies, are pressuring politicians like Labor and Liberal and Coalition politicians. She also asserted that the Liberals and the Nationals are still taking donations from the likes of tobacco companies. I'm disappointed that we haven't seen published the terms of reference to the ANU investigation about e-cigarette, and they were a bit tight-lipped when I met them after the address. Well, I'd like them to unloosen the lips and be more transparent about what will be in that terms of reference for the e-cigarette investigation and report that Minister Hunt has commissioned. But there was bipartisanship from Labor and the Coalition on that very key issue of legalised vaping in Australia. It's 8 to 8 on 2.